The harder you grip something, the faster it slides out of your hand. This is true of wet soap, and it is true of almost everything you have ever wanted badly enough to lose sleep over. Watch the man who wants the promotion so much he rehearses every sentence before the meeting and comes across stiff, overprepared, faintly desperate. Watch the woman who wants love so much she reads every text twice for hidden meaning and somehow becomes harder to love. The wanting itself, past a certain intensity, starts working against the thing it wants. Alan Watts called this the backwards law. He noticed that trying to stay afloat makes you sink, and that trying to sink is what makes you float. And that this small, almost comic observation about swimming turns out to describe nearly the entire structure of human suffering. It would be convenient if the answer was simply to want less, to care less, to lower the stakes until nothing could hurt you. That is not what this is. The people who stop caring don't float either. They just drown quietly, without the struggle. So here is what this video is actually going to show you. The exact psychological difference between wanting something and needing it to prove you're worth something. A difference so fine that you have probably never been taught to feel it. And the specific shift that lets you keep the wanting without the drowning. Because the goal was never to want less. It was to stop needing the water to prove you can swim. Most people think effort is effort, that trying harder is always, in some basic sense, the right move. Watts didn't think so. He thought there were two entirely different things hiding under that one word, and confusing them is the root of most of the exhaustion in your life. In the preface to the Wisdom of Insecurity, Watts describes what he calls the law of reversed effort. Try to stay on the surface of water, and you sink. Try to sink, and you float. Hold your breath to keep it, and you lose it. Let it go, and it's yours. He wasn't being clever for its own sake. He was pointing at a mechanism that governs far more than swimming. The mechanism by which grasping at a thing changes its shape, tightens what should stay loose, and turns a fluid situation into a rigid one that cracks under its own tension. Watts wrote this book in 1951, at the exact moment his own life had come apart. He had just lost his position as an Episcopal priest and gone through a divorce, and he was, by his own account, in no position to preach certainty from a pulpit. What he offered instead wasn't reassurance. It was a spent priest's honest report from inside the wreckage. Security had failed him, and in its failure he'd found something sturdier standing underneath it. That's part of why the book still lands the way it does. It isn't a philosopher's theory about insecurity. It's a man who had already lost his footing, describing exactly what he found when he stopped trying to get it back. Here is the part that matters for you specifically. Every action you take carries a quality, not just a direction. A sentence said from clean desire, and the identical sentence said from desperate need, land completely differently on the person hearing it. Even when the words are word for word the same. The interviewer feels it. The date feels it. The client on the other end of the negotiation feels it, usually before you've said anything at all. What they're responding to isn't your competence, it's your grip. This is why trying harder so often produces worse results, not better ones. The extra effort isn't extra skill, it's extra tension. And tension has a way of leaking into your voice, your timing, your face, in ways you cannot consciously correct, because you can't see your own grip from inside it. So here is the first thing to actually do with this. The next time you notice yourself preparing intensely for something, over-rehearsing, over-checking, replaying, stop for 1 second and locate the sensation in your body, not the thought. The sensation. Most people find it somewhere specific. A tightness behind the sternum, a clenched jaw, shoulders pulled toward the ears. That physical signature is the tell. It is the difference between moving towards something and pushing against it. And once you can feel it, you can catch it in real time. In the middle of the meeting, the middle of the message you're about to send, The middle of the plan you're gripping so hard it's starting to crack in your hands. This isn't a trick for relaxing. Watts wasn't interested in helping you feel calmer while you keep doing the same thing. He was pointing at something stranger, that the tension itself is the malfunction, and that underneath it is a completely different way of wanting something, one that doesn't need the water to prove you can swim. To understand what that different way of wanting actually looks like, we have to look at what's doing the gripping in the first place. And Watts had a very precise answer for that too. One that splits you in half and then shows you why the split was never real. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. I and me. Two words for what feels like the same thing, and yet Watts insists they're not the same thing at all. And the gap between them is exactly where your suffering lives. In The Wisdom of the Body, Watts describes the war most of us are fighting without noticing. The I, the reasonable fellow upstairs, forever criticizing me, the wayward flesh below, for its appetites, its moods, its refusal to behave. The I wants to be certain. The me, the actual living organism, just wants what it wants, cleanly, in the moment it wants it. Most people assume this internal management is just responsible adulthood. It isn't. It's a split, and the split is where the compulsion gets manufactured. Here's the mechanism. The body wants food, and it stops wanting food once it's fed. But the brain, Watts points out, keeps eating long after the stomach is full. Because it isn't hungry for food, it's hungry for certainty about tomorrow's food. That same substitution happens with almost everything you chase. You don't want the promotion the way your body wants water. You want it the way your brain wants a guarantee that you matter, that the last 5 years weren't wasted, that you're not falling behind people you've quietly been comparing yourself to. The object becomes a stand-in for a reassurance no object can actually deliver. This is the difference between clean desire and compulsive need, and it rarely announces itself honestly. Compulsive need dresses itself up as ambition, as diligence, as simply wanting good things for yourself. But you can tell them apart by what happens when you imagine not getting the thing. Clean desire produces disappointment, real but survivable, contained. Compulsive need produces something closer to dread, because what's actually on the line isn't the outcome. It's your sense that you're allowed to exist comfortably in your own life. Watts would say the I manufactures this dread because it has mistaken itself for something that needs defending, a fixed, separate self that has to keep proving its worth to stay real. The me, the actual organism, was never asking for any of that. It just wanted to eat, to work, to love, and then move on to the next present moment. The compulsion is not coming from your desires. It's coming from an I trying to use your desires as evidence for a trial that never needed to happen. So here is the question to actually run, on whatever you're currently pushing hardest for. Picture, specifically and in detail, not getting it. The meeting goes badly. The person doesn't call back. The deal falls through. Then ask plainly, does something in me collapse? Or does something in me just feel sad for a while? If the honest answer is collapse, you've found where the I has quietly taken a wanting and turned it into a referendum on whether you're allowed to be okay. That collapse versus sadness distinction matters because of what it reveals about time. The dread you feel isn't actually about the outcome. It's about a future your mind has already started rehearsing in vivid detail before anything has happened. And that rehearsal, it turns out, is doing something specific and measurable to the only moment you actually have access to, this one. Two people can sit in the exact same room, eating the exact same meal, surrounded by the exact same people who love them, and only one of them is actually there. Watts illustrates this with a deceptively simple case in Pain and Time. A man is told he needs surgery in 2 weeks. Until then, he has no physical pain. He is well fed, surrounded by friends, doing work he normally enjoys. And none of it reaches him. His mind has already checked out to a future event, replaying it, bracing for it, living inside a version of the operating table that doesn't exist yet, while the actual, edible, present 2 weeks quietly evaporate around him, untouched. This is not a story about surgery. It's a story about every deadline, every pending result, every "I'll relax once this is settled" you've ever told yourself. The dread doesn't wait politely for the event to arrive. It moves in early, and it charges rent on every day leading up to it. Here's what makes this relevant to performance, not just peace of mind. Watts's point is that consciousness has a strange trade-off built into it. The same brain that lets you plan for tomorrow is the brain that goes dim to today. And whatever you're actually doing, the conversation, the interview, the work itself, happens in the part of you that's currently absent, rehearsing a future that isn't real yet. You are not underperforming because you lack skill. You are underperforming because the version of you doing the task is only half present, with the other half stationed 2 weeks ahead, guarding a door that hasn't opened. This reframes something people usually get backwards. We assume more anticipation means more preparation, more control, a better shot at the outcome we want. Watts would say the opposite is closer to true. The anticipating mind isn't preparing, it's rehearsing suffering in advance. And that rehearsal comes directly out of the attention your actual performance needed. So here is the practice, and it takes about 10 seconds to run. Notice the exact instant your mind leaves the room. Usually a specific trigger, checking your phone mid-conversation, drifting mid-sentence into how the meeting might go, replaying a message you already sent. The moment you catch that drift, don't fight it or scold yourself for it. Just name, silently, one sensory fact that is true right now. The temperature of the air, a sound in the room, the weight of your own hands. This isn't a mantra, it's a tether. It gives the part of you that left somewhere to land. Do this enough times, and something shifts that's hard to explain until you've felt it. The dreaded future event, when it finally arrives, is no longer being met by someone exhausted from having lived through it 50 times already in imagination. It's being met by someone who actually saved their attention for the one moment that was ever going to matter, the one happening now. But this raises an uncomfortable question. If your own mind can undermine you this quietly, from the inside, imagine what your need is doing on the outside, to the people who can feel it coming off you before you've said a word. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. You have felt it from the other side, long before you ever named it. The friend who calls too often, the candidate who follows up 3 times in a week, the date who texts, "Just checking you got my last message," 40 minutes after sending it. You didn't need a psychology degree to feel your own instinct to step back. You just felt it. A small, involuntary retreat, the way you'd step back from someone standing slightly too close. What you were responding to wasn't anything they said. It was the need underneath what they said. And need has a frequency people pick up on without being able to explain how. Watts's account of the isolated I helps explain why. The self that believes it must secure a specific outcome to be safe is, by definition, a self in a defensive crouch. And a crouch reads as threat or as weakness to anyone standing near it, even when the words coming out of it are perfectly polite. Now turn the mirror around. You have been that person. In the job search where you needed this offer, specifically, immediately, and the interview came out slightly too eager, slightly too grateful in advance. In the relationship where you needed the reassurance more than you wanted the connection, and somehow that need pushed away the very person meant to supply it. This isn't bad luck repeating itself. It's the same signal, broadcasting from you, being received exactly as it was sent. Here is the part that stings a little. You have almost certainly mistaken this for trying hard, for caring, for showing commitment. It is none of those things. Trying hard is visible in the quality of your work. Need is visible in your face, your timing, the slight excess of everything. Too many follow-ups, too much explaining, too fast a response to every silence. What reads as commitment to you reads, to the person across from you, as scarcity. And people do not move towards scarcity. They move away from it, carefully, so as not to seem unkind. The test is simple and slightly uncomfortable to run honestly. Think of something you're currently pursuing, a job, a person, a deal, and ask what you would do differently in the next interaction if you already, unshakably, had it. Would you write a shorter message? Wait a day instead of an hour? Ask for less reassurance in the room? The gap between what you'd do if you already had it and what you're actually doing now is the exact shape of your need made visible. Close that gap on purpose, even once, and watch how differently the room responds to you. None of this means faking indifference. Watts wasn't recommending a performance of not caring. That's just need wearing a mask, and people can smell a mask almost as fast as they can smell desperation. What he was pointing toward is something else entirely, a way of acting, wanting, and even competing that doesn't run on fear at all. And for that, he takes us somewhere unexpected, not into detachment, but into what he called a creative morality, where letting go turns out to be the very engine of doing something well. Ask most people why they work hard, and they'll give you an answer that sounds like virtue but functions like fear. To be respected, to avoid falling behind, to prove the sacrifice was worth it. Watts would say, notice that every one of those reasons is still the I, still negotiating with a threat, still running the same circular errand it's been running the whole video. In creative morality, Watts draws a line most self-improvement content never gets near. There is action motivated by reward and punishment, even internal reward, even something as quiet as guilt or self-respect. And there is action that isn't motivated at all, in the usual sense. It simply moves, the way attention moves toward whatever it's genuinely absorbed in. The first kind is always, underneath, still a transaction with fear. The second kind doesn't need managing, because there's no threat it's trying to manage. This sounds abstract until you've actually felt both. Compare working late because you're afraid of what happens if you don't, versus working late because the problem in front of you has actually swallowed your attention and you looked up and it was midnight. Same hours, same desk, entirely different nervous system running the operation. One is motivated. The other, Watts would say, is simply mind doing what mind does when it isn't split against itself, absorbed rather than defended. The mistake most driven people make is assuming the fear-based version is the responsible one, and the absorbed version is a luxury for people with nothing at stake. Watts's point cuts the other way. The absorbed version produces better work, not softer work, because none of its energy is being diverted into managing a threat that was manufactured in the first place. Fear-driven effort is always paying a tax. Absorbed effort pays no tax at all. This is not a case for apathy, and it's worth being direct about that, because the confusion is common and costly. Letting go of the outcome as a condition of your worth is not the same as letting go of your commitment to the process. You can care enormously about doing something well and feel almost nothing about whether it proves anything about you. These are not opposites pulling against each other. They're simply two different things that most people have never been taught to separate. So here is the practice, and it applies to whatever you're facing this week. A pitch, a difficult conversation, a piece of work you've been avoiding. Before you begin, say to yourself, plainly, I am completely committed to doing this well, and in the same breath, my worth does not move an inch based on how it turns out. Say both halves. Most people are only ever taught the first half, And it's the second half that actually removes the tax. What's left, once you've genuinely stopped needing the outcome to mean something about you, is not less desire. It's desire with nothing left to defend, which is, it turns out, the only condition under which the thing you wanted was ever going to arrive at all. Go back to the water for a moment, not to learn the lesson again, you already have it, but to notice something about the metaphor itself. You were never actually fighting the water. You were fighting an idea you'd formed about what would happen if you stopped fighting it. The water was always going to hold you. It was the bracing against it that made you sink. That's the shape of everything we've walked through. The grip that ruined the meeting. The eye that turned a want into a referendum. The mind that left the room 2 weeks early to rehearse a door that hadn't opened yet. The need that people could feel coming off you before you said a word. None of it was ever really about the promotion, or the person, or the deal. It was about a hand that had forgotten it was allowed to open. Here is the part Watts never lets you soften into a technique. You cannot let go as a strategy for getting the thing faster. The moment letting go becomes clever, becomes one more maneuver aimed at the outcome. The grip is back, just wearing a looser-looking glove. The only letting go that actually changes anything is the kind that stops asking the outcome to mean something about you at all. Not because you've given up, because you've finally noticed there was never anything to prove in the first place. This is not comfortable. It will not feel, at first, like relief. It will feel like standing at the edge of something with your hands open and nothing to hold on to. Because that is exactly what it is. The nervous system that has spent years gripping does not relax the first time you tell it to. It takes the water seriously long after you've stopped needing it to. But something does wait on the other side of that discomfort. And it isn't indifference, and it isn't resignation. It's a kind of attention you haven't used in a long time. The kind that was always available underneath the grip, doing the actual swimming, while the rest of you was busy being afraid of drowning. You don't have to believe any of this today. You only have to notice, the next time your hand closes around something, that it was capable of opening the whole time. If this landed the way it should, the video on your screen right now will too. Click to keep watching.